As the Daybreak Show continues on here, time for the Sheriff Sit Down, presented by our Community Credit Union. Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury, how are you?
Good morning, Jeff.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Made some national news in the last week or so.
There's all kinds of news.
You guys were in USA Today. There was a letter, July 15th. I have it here. It's also online. People can find it, and throughout the news media. I'll read just parts of it. Prompted by increasing public concern to safeguard constitutional rights, we, the elected sheriffs of Washington State, soundly reaffirm our sworn oaths to support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Washington. This was signed by almost all 38 sheriffs across the state of Washington. What's the reason for this?
Jeff, as you know, especially in the last couple of years, everything's controversial anymore. I don't care really what it is. There's always far one side and far the other side of any issues anymore. It doesn't seem like people meet in the middle. As you know, about a year or so ago, there were some issues involving I-940.
Yep.
People having different issues with what we call some people's gun rights and back and forth. And there was people adamantly opposed to that. There was people very much supportive of it. And both camps are about as far away as you can get. As you probably know, each of us as a sheriff in the state of Washington, we take an oath when we start that we'll uphold the Constitution of the United States. And that's what we do. And every once in a while, or sometimes there are laws that conflict or appear to conflict or imply to conflict, and we're left in the middle. And we try to be very neutral, but we try to respect everyone's rights in those processes. And as you know, last spring, last summer, it was before the COVID stuff came up. We had some rallies in town here, and we're in the middle. And you saw what was going on all over the country in those. And it just gets to, you have people far on one side and far on the other side, and then they both come to the sheriffs to express their views and want you to take their side.
Sure. And
when you walk the line down the middle, then neither one of them like you. But it is our obligation to uphold all of the Constitution. And within that, and we'll probably get calls on this because no matter how I say it, somebody gets offended. There are people out there that feel very, very strongly about their First Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. And we have to respect that. They have the right to speak openly and freely and assemble and all those things that you'll see. You have other people that speak very, very strongly about their Second Amendment rights. And sometimes those conflict. And with all the other things that have been happening in the country, the sheriffs of the state of Washington, we meet a number of times a year together and usually in a central location, have meetings. And all that letter was meant to do is to reaffirm that the sheriffs of the state of Washington take an oath to uphold the constitutional rights of everyone. And immediately, it gets taken to one side or the other, full well expecting that was probably going to happen. Mm-hmm. But the sheriffs were just coming out to say, listen, we are here to respect everybody's rights. And that's what we're going to do. And then immediately it goes from one side to the other.
Is there a county constitution or is there like a county charter?
Well, the Constitution, the state Constitution, and then you have, codes and rules and laws that are effective within your own county. And so, your Constitution is your primary off that.
So the U.S. Constitution would be considered the top.
Yes.
State Constitution.
Right.
And then whatever county charters or bylaws.
Pretty much. But there are some times that, as you see this last year, and you obviously you've interviewed me and Chief Sperling, and now you'll see from almost all the chiefs and sheriffs in the state have deep concerns about some of the laws that the legislature has passed. Mm-hmm. The challenge with those is it kind of depends on some of them on the interpretation and from whose vantage point or viewpoint is looking at those. The sheriffs, especially in the state, spoke up along with representatives from Waspic concerning some of those issues that were being passed, not necessarily against all of them, but we had some concerns that they were conflicting. And the legislature chose to pass those regardless, and now we have these conflicts. And there are some of those that are very, very challenging for us that Ryan's discussed, I've discussed on how we're going to respond or not going to respond or how it is because of the new laws. Now many of the legislators that pass those are coming back and say, well, that's not what we intended. Sure. Well, what you wrote that we have to follow and what you intended, we tried to explain that, And there's some of those that conflict.
So now, when it comes to 940, the initiative process, or even some of these laws that are going through, are you enforcing those as signed by the governor, or are you waiting for them to go through the judicial process for the constitutionality of them?
On that particular one, there was some issues involved in that the courts needed to look at. And I should have brought it today. I wrote a letter out during that time as people were questioning, are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And there were some implications in it that had constitutional issues that were really entangled. It was like a bowl of spaghetti. You reach in, you try to pull on one thing, it moves something else. And it was kind of messy. And so we were waiting for some rulings on that. And during that time, I produced a letter that said that before we take action on these, and at least in my office, that we would give due consideration to whatever the issue was, and we would consult our prosecutor, because that's our legal representative on each of these situations. And immediately people came and said, the sheriff said he's not going to do what we're telling him to do, the one side.
Right.
That wasn't the case at all. If you read the letter at the bottom, leave yourself that opening. We're going to go through the process, and our prosecutor is our legal advisor, and we're going to, on each situation, people, I hear the word I hear, and they have ears on, they're called yabbits. And they're all over the place. Yabbit sheriff this, yabbit sheriff that, or what if?
Mm-hmm.
You can't answer every question because every situation's a tiny little bit different and can make a big difference. But what if? And as soon as you give a direct answer on their particular thing, then it changes. Or they don't tell you the whole story. So we look at the totality of the circumstance. We make our best judgment, and if we have questions of where we need to go on that, we contact our prosecutor. We look for that legal advice.
And then and I don't want you to speak for prosecutors, Michael Dorsey in the county, but what does he do to move the potential case forward then? Does he look at it from all aspects of the report that was written by the sheriff's office, and then says, I recommend that this
I think that, and I would let Mike answer that, because that's his area of specialty, and all the attorneys. But Mike looks down to see, are we following, the state guidelines? Are we following a state law? Are we following it? Does it fall within a constitutional law? They have all kinds of considerations that they make on every single judgment that we have, and it doesn't come down to that every single time.
Right.
But we do consult with our prosecutor, especially on like 940. Where are we sitting on this? And we do kind of the what if thing with him as well, to say, if we're in this situation, here's what we're going to do. We're going to call you, or we're going to communicate with you before this gets forwarded on. And the prosecutor determines charges, not the sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people come down and say, well, you did this. Well, no, we forward the case to the prosecutor, and prosecutors make charging decisions, not sheriffs. It's just like when people say, well, you let him out of jail. The sheriff didn't let them out of jail. That's a process of the courts and the system. It's not the sheriff of the county that lets people in and out of jail unless directed by. So, there's some confusion. People don't understand the law. The challenge behind the most recent stuff that came out is that, all in good faith and perspective, we ask different attorneys different questions, and we get different answers.
Sure.
And so our primary person to seek legal counsel from is our prosecutor, somebody in the prosecutor's office.
Some of the laws changed over the weekend. Some of the other laws are going to change at the first of the month. And I'm just curious how it works as the clock moves past midnight.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody is pulled over, 10 minutes to midnight, and the stop lasts through the overnight, through the midnight hour into the new day, how does that work?
Likely at the time the incident occurred is when that's going to happen.
So that's when they note on the report at 11:49 the stop was.
And hence, Jeff, it's really an interesting question, an important question, because and it happens to us sometimes. It's really challenging because we're out there and all of a sudden an incident occurs, and we check back at our times. All of a sudden, the dispatch center at 11:59 hours on this date, this occurred. Well, and 30 seconds later, it's the next day.
Right.
And so when we discuss in our reports, we have to note that we're into the next day now. And it's really, you get used to it when you're out there at night, especially the line officers and deputies out there working at night, and the troopers, because most of us, we all wear a watch all the time, and generally most of us have it set on a 24-hour time. So when that time changes, you know that you're into the next day. Otherwise, you know, it's 6 in the morning or 6 at night. So we're very careful with that. But that becomes very important on legal issues. You know, what time did this occur? What day did it occur? And you want to testify in court and be accurate that I'm testifying on this date at this time. And people will say, well, he said this, but that's not what happened. But 30 seconds later, it was the next day.
Right.
So you're talking about Sunday and Monday or Tuesday and Wednesday. You have to be accurate. It's challenging sometimes. We're kind of aware of that. You've done it for a while.
Yeah. The Sheriff Sit Down is presented by Our Community Credit Union, and we really appreciate the time Sheriff Salisbury has for us. Thank you.
Thank you.